Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. I hope it's been an amazing Tuesday for all of you, because it has been for me. But in a few moments, you'll get to hear my thoughts and feelings on episode 4 of the Kings of Napa. And I think it's worth noting that episode 4 marks the halfway point in the first season of the show. And speaking of the first season of the Kings of Napa, while I personally enjoy watching it, the ratings for the show have been pretty low, even for a scripted series on OWN. So if you enjoy the Kings of Napa, and you want to get a season 2 of the show, then spread the word and get more people to check it out. But without any further delay, let's jump into the review. Episode 4, entitled Dear Wine People, focuses on 3 main storylines. First, Dana getting his respect. Second, the hunt for the extortionist. And third, Bridget being in the thick of things. First, let's talk about Dana. In the beginning of the episode, we get a flashback scene of Dana at a job interview. Before Dana walks in, the employees are thoroughly impressed with his resume and they're eager to meet him. Unfortunately, when they finally meet him, they are taken aback. And in the back of Dana's mind, he didn't get the job because the employees didn't respect him for how he looked. Fast forward a few minutes later, and Melanie is having lunch with Dana. She talks to him about some family business, but she also lets Dana know that she has a connect to get him an interview with an organization called Asset Makers. The purpose of the interview is to get Dana featured in a magazine and to get him recognized around the country. Unfortunately, this opportunity causes Dana to act a fool. After letting the family know about his opportunity, he treats the family like crap. Everyone except Melanie, that is. At one point, Rose gets a scene where she's trying to butter Dana up by letting Dana know that she's on his side, but Dana doesn't take the bait. Instead, he lays down the Uno reverse card, letting her know all the times he supported her, especially when it didn't benefit his interest. The hard truth causes Rose to walk away from Dana, and I can honestly say that after watching this particular scene, I was 100% on board with Dana. If you have a significant other who you continuously support, but they are against you when you need them the most, then it can be a little challenging to gain their respect back. Later in the episode, when Asset Makers comes to visit the family home, Dana only acknowledges Melanie as the most meaningful relative in his life. This causes a rift in the family, especially Vanessa, who accuses Melanie of trying to drive a wedge between her and Dana. During the family interview with Asset Makers, the family starts to throw shots at one another, which causes the interviewer to walk away but keep the camera rolling. This is when the family starts to air out their dirty laundry, and the interviewer conveniently comes in to shut the camera off and leave without asking any further questions. Dana says some very hurtful things to the family, especially his mother during this scene. But Vanessa is indeed the master manipulator. She not only calls the board at Asset Makers to kill the interview, but she feeds Dana the story of how she didn't want to abort him, and how it was his father who caused him to not get hired anywhere. If you ask me, Vanessa is playing Dana for a fool and telling him whatever he needs to hear to get in his good graces and to never trust Melanie again. Vanessa is by far the show's main villain. But towards the end of the episode, the family views Dana as a hero and a necessary asset for the family. Now let's talk about this pesky extortionist. Quincy, aka the problem solver, meets with the family and lets them know that he has to be the extortionist. Quincy shares that Otis has purchased an expensive boat and has a lot of money in his bank account that didn't come from his salary at the vineyard. There's some discussion amongst Dana and August on whether they should call the police on Otis. August ultimately convinces Dana not to call the police, but that is only temporary. After Dana learns that Bridget's employer's vineyard had been sabotaged and Otis had access to the vineyard, he makes the executive decision and calls the police. The police try to arrest Otis, but he takes off in his car, crashes it, and has to go to the hospital because he's in a coma. Now, as I'm watching this entire sequence play out, I have to say that it was one of the most silliest and dumbest sequences that I've seen in the show thus far. But when I reflect on how Otis was unsuccessful in getting away, I came up with this theory. I do not believe that Otis is the extortionist. That would be entirely too easy because it's obvious. I think the extortionist is the vineyard worker who spoke to Christian at the end of the episode. First off, none of the other vineyard workers, except for Otis, had as much screen time as this guy did. Second, he has access to the king's mansion, and he likely has access to Bridget's employer's vineyard. And third, I think the real extortionist set Otis up to be the fall guy. If I were a betting man, that's what I would pick. But lastly, let's talk about Bridget. During this episode, Bridget was still at odds with August and Vanessa. Bridget's taking a tour of her employee's vineyard, and she learns that the employers have been extorted by the same anonymous person that's extorting them. And throughout it all, I find it hard to believe that nobody has ever thought to contact the police or a lawyer about the matter. But I digress. Later on, Bridget tries to tell August about what's going on, but August and Vanessa team up on Bridget, which leads Bridget to tell Vanessa about the extortionist. Vanessa doesn't take the news very well, but later on in the episode, everyone comes together to talk about the extortionist problem. After the meeting, Christian links up with Bridget to learn about what it takes to maintain a proper vineyard. Christian is completely clueless but still wants to prove his worth to the family. August and Bridget then have a scene together, and August uses her gift of gab to try to win over Bridget. Bridget in turn says that she'll have to think about it. And towards the end of the episode, Christian is seen working in the vineyard, but the potential extortionist asks him about his cheat sheet for the vineyard. Christian then goes back into the home, and for some reason he goes into Bridget's bag, where he finds the same type of weed killer that was used to sabotage Bridget's employer's vineyard. Now, of course, the show wants us to believe that Bridget is the possible extortionist. But again, that would be too easy. I'll say this again. The extortionist is likely the guy that told Christian to get his cheat sheet. It has to be. But outside of these main storylines, we also get two minor ones. August and Kelvin have their scene together, which adds to the backstory behind their relationship. And Vanessa and Melanie have their scene together, and they seemingly have some much needed closure when it comes to Melanie's affair with Reggie. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode a 5. It was silly and dumb in some areas, but the writing is not as strong as the past 3 episodes in my opinion. I can see these plot twists and turns coming from a mile away, but we shall see what happens in the remaining 4 episodes. But this marks the end of my review. Feel free to leave a comment below in the comment section and I'll reply to each and every comment. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.